pretty south in the house, coming straight out the bayou. We
You know, I like the sound of that. It's been 4 years since I've had a gavel, so. But you'll always be my chairman, Mr. Chairman. And the quorum being present, the Committee on Foreign Affairs will come to order. Pursuant to notice, the committee is meeting today to organize, which involves consideration of 3 items that were previously provided in members' offices. 1, the committee rules. 2, a professional staff list. And 3, the committee's oversight plan. Without objection, the chair may recess the committee at any point, and any recorded votes may be rolled. Anybody playing music on iPhones will be escorted out of the room immediately. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. First, I'd like to start by thanking my dear friend. Like I said, he'll always be a chairman to me, but the title now is ranking member. But I would say during the last Congress, he showed respect and civility to me and to all the members of this committee. And I have every intention of doing the same. That is the tradition of this committee. This committee, unlike other committees, is a bipartisan committee. It has a deep sense of history and a deep sense of respect for each other. And I appreciate how we accomplished so much last Congress, and I look forward to what we're going to do this Congress. I'm honored to serve as the chairman of this committee. For those of you who don't know the history, it's really older than our country. It was first established during the Continental Congress. Its original members included John Jay, who would become the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and its first chairman was Benjamin Franklin. Franklin was notorious for a lot of things, but probably is best establishing strong diplomatic ties with our allies at that time, France, and many of whom remain our allies today. Now our charge is to continue the critical work that our founding fathers began so long ago, dating back to the Continental Congress. You know, and I was at the, in Boston, I got to see, where the Constitution Declaration was signed at Independence Hall, and it's just always inspiring to see where our nation was founded and created in those sacred documents. And to think that this committee, that the founders were part of what this committee sprang from makes me even more proud to be sitting here as a chairman next to my good friend Greg. I believe that we have the long-standing tradition of bipartisanship. That will continue. I know the climate's hot in Congress right now, and the tension. But when we disagree, we can agree to disagree, and we can do so civilly. As former Chairman Engel often told me, when it comes to foreign policy, partisanship stops at the water's edge. Now, we will have our moments, but that's what great debate's all about. But we can do it with respect for each other. This committee is so important because it deals with issues of war and peace. We manage the foreign military sales. We manage foreign military financing. We are involved in what's happening in Ukraine and in Taiwan and all across the globe, helping our allies defeat our enemies. We manage authorized use of force resolutions and the declarations of war that one has not been used since World War II. Hopefully we will not have to use those in this Congress, but we can all agree it's a pretty hot time right now when you look at Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. This committee, I believe that we are in tumultuous times. This committee has never been more relevant in the 20 years I've been in Congress. And with the global challenges and threats that we face from our foreign adversaries, I think all of you should be proud of the work you're doing for this committee. I don't care what they call it, A or not. This goes back historically to the Founding Fathers, and the work that we do is more serious and more important than any other committee I can think of in this great capital. And make no mistake, we're currently in a struggle for the global balance of power right now. It's never been more important for us to strengthen our diplomats so they can succeed, because when they fail, we go to war. And war should always be the last resort. We want our diplomats to succeed. And war, as I said, should always be the last option. In the wake of the Chinese surveillance balloon traversing our country, crossing our national security assets, and threatening the privacy of Americans, it is clear that we must start our work with confronting the China challenge, the great power competition we find ourselves in today with very substantial and significant actions. This includes properly arming Taiwan. Many of you may not know I signed off and the chairman, now ranking member, on weapons sales to Taiwan 3 years ago that have yet to go into country. We have a defense industrial-based problem in this country. That means we can't make weapons fast enough. This committee will be charged to work with Armed Services Committee to fix that threat to our country, which General McKenzie told me in his last briefing to me in the SCIF was perhaps the greatest threat that we face right now, to fix that system. We also need to ensure that Ukraine has the tools it needs to defeat the Russian army. Not just because it is the morally right thing to do in the face of the horrific war crimes that Russia has perpetrated in Ukraine, but it's also because a Russian loss is a victory for U.S. national security. The security assistance that we have given to Ukraine amounts to just 3% of last year's DoD budget. But with that, we have enabled Ukraine to cripple the military of one of our greatest adversaries without risking the life of one American soldier. Not one American soldier has gone into harm's way, and we've annihilated the Russian military. Now they're throwing prisoners down there without the equipment that they need to win this thing. But we can't do this as a slow pace. We need to do this quickly and end it fast. I believe that we have enabled Ukraine to move on. They can achieve victory if given the right weapon systems. I also believe in the tried and true historical lessons that we've learned from World War II and other wars, that weakness invites aggression. That when this nation projects strength, we promote peace. When we project weakness, we invite aggression, and therefore we invite war. So it's important that I think we have that projection of power and strength. The best way to deter China is a Russian loss, because Ukraine today could be the Taiwan tomorrow. We also need to dig into what caused dictators like Putin, Chairman Xi, the Ayatollah, and Kim Jong-un to become so emboldened since this president took office. And on that, I think we can all agree that all roads lead back to the horrific withdrawal from Afghanistan. For almost 2 weeks, we watched one horrific scene after another playing out on televisions around the world, and culminating in the Abbey Gate bombing. We lost 13 U.S. service members on that day, with dozens more wounded in that attack It was the deadliest day for the United States military in Afghanistan since 2011. We now know the Biden administration left behind more than 1,000 Americans, American citizens, tens of thousands of our Afghan partners, and hundreds of thousands of at-risk Afghans, and many more women under the rule of the Taliban. We owe this to our veterans and to our Gold Star mothers and families to give them answers as to what happened. Why did this go so wrong? Why did it go so badly? And this should be a bipartisan oversight exercise for our veterans and for those who paid and gave the ultimate price and the ultimate sacrifice. That's why our first hearing will be on China. Our second hearing that we will kick off will be our investigation into what happened during the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Our committee also has jurisdiction over the root causes of migration. The former president helped to secure the border with a pen. This was rescinded. Now the border is worse than I've ever seen it in my lifetime. So we're going to look into reestablishing the third-party asylum cooperative agreements and the Remain in Mexico agreements that were working, that the cartels understood, that these policies kept them out of the United States, where today they're then released into our society under catch and release. And as chairman of the Homeland Security Committee for 3 terms, and as a former federal prosecutor, I've learned a lot about what works and what doesn't. And political asylum is at the core of this because that creates the magnet that draws the migration to the United States. If you turn the magnet off, you fix the problem. We're going to see how we can help American companies invest in Central and South America because we know that can help mitigate illegal immigration. That will get to the root cause because 85% are fleeing because of economic reasons, not the 15% for political. If we can lift, as President Kennedy said, a rising tide lifts all boats. If we can lift their economies of scale, they will stay in their own countries. As I believe the ambassador from Guatemala said so well, I don't want aid, I want trade. I want private American investment in my country. I don't want to lose a generation that will lead my country for years. I want them to stay. So I think that private investment gets to the root cause. And now to the fun part. I want to now welcome our returning members, but also welcome the new Republican members of this committee. I really think you're going to enjoy both the style that the ranking member and I have in governance, but more importantly, how important these issues are to this nation. Every one of them are important to our national security, to our well-being, the well-being of it goes from everything from hard power with weapons to soft power with global health to PEPFAR reauthorization, which we heard the president talk about last night and got a standing ovation, Republican and Democrat. The great things we do helping other nations is the best diplomacy that we can send to then use our diplomatic soft power to win the hearts and minds of people around the world against our adversaries who have a very different worldview than we do. And that's one of oppression, tyranny, taking away religious freedoms, and persecution. So with that, I want to recognize the new members. First, we have Congressman Bill Huizenga. Bill, and he's from a great state of Michigan. Great to have you, sir. Got a waiver on financial services. We have Representative Amada Radewagan. And she's a native from the Samoa Islands, which would be a great perspective to have as we look at the island chain that President Xi is threatening so much in the Pacific Ocean. Very pleased to have Congressman French Hill from Arkansas. Brings a lot of talent, skill from financial services. He's like an ambassador to me. Would be a great asset. A Vietnam veteran, Mr. Jim Baird. Very pleased to have Mr. Baird. Warren Davidson comes to us from Ohio. Will give us a different perspective, which is always good to have on a committee. Michael Waltz, Florida. great service to our country over the many years. Worked at so many high levels within the United States government, and this committee, we're very pleased to have you seated with us. Thomas Kane. You may know Tom's father, who was one of the on the 9/11 Commission, has testified before this committee in Homeland, and have great respect for your family, sir. And it's great to have you. We also have Michael Lawler from New York. We've got Corey Mills from Florida. Corey has extensive experience in Afghanistan and Iraq, as does Rich McCormick from Georgia. From my great state of Texas, Nathaniel Moran. Thank you, Nathaniel. And John Janes from Michigan, West Point graduate. Going to serve the committee well, has a lot of passion. We look forward to your energy. And then finally, Keith Self from my home state of Texas. Keith served at the NATO command in Brussels and many other posts within throughout the world with our United States military. I'd also like to announce our leadership roster for the committee's 7 subcommittees. So they are as follows. For the Subcommittee on Africa, I'd like to recognize the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. James, who will serve as chair, and the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mills, who will serve as vice chair. For the Subcommittee on Europe, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Kane, will serve as the chair, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self, will serve as the vice chair. For the Subcommittee on Indo-Pacific, the gentlelady from California, Ms. Kim, will serve as chair, and the gentlelady from the American Samoa, Ms. Radawagan, will serve as the vice chair. For the Subcommittee on the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson, will serve as the chair, and the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Burchett, will serve as the vice chair. For the Subcommittee on Western Hemisphere, the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Salazar, who I understand is sick with a high fever today and couldn't make it, but we're praying for her. She will serve as the chair, and the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Heisinger, will serve as the vice chair. And for the Subcommittee on Global Health, Global Human Rights, and International Organizations, the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Smith, who I must say has served more than some have been alive in Congress, 43 years, am I correct, of outstanding service to your country. Thank you, sir, for that. Believe it or not, there are some older people around here you can learn a lot from, and Chris is certainly one of those. But he'll serve as the chairman, and the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Hill, will serve as the vice chair. And finally, for the Subcommittee on Oversight and Accountability, the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Mast, an Afghanistan veteran, highly decorated, gave his limbs for his nation, for his country. We all respect you greatly, sir, not only for what you did in Afghanistan, but your service here in Congress to the nation. And the gentleman from California, who has vast experience in oversight, he chaired the Oversight and Government Relations Reform Committee, will serve as the vice chair, along with the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Waltz. So with that, I'd like to announce the full vice chair of the full committee, who will be my good friend from Missouri. This will be your, I think, 3rd term now as the vice chair. Well, you're vice ranker, but now you're vice chair of the full committee. So thank all of you. I look forward to working with each and every one of you on both sides of the aisle. This covers the entire world, which is our purview, and it's going to be an exciting Congress. So with that, I'd love to yield to my dear friend, Mr. Greg Meeks, the ranking member, for his opening statements.
Let me thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I truly, really mean congratulations to you. You have been a partner. We talk both on and off the record, all hours of the day, all hours of the evening, strategizing how to work together. And no matter where I go in the world, folks always come up and compliment us because they know that you and I work together. And when I speak to individuals with the change of power, they ask me, will there be any difference? And I say, absolutely no difference. That we will work in the same manner as we worked, and I want to thank all members of this committee for the respect you've bestowed upon me as chair, for the cooperation, because you exemplify democracy. And that's what this committee is all about. This committee is important to me. I've been here not as long as Mr. Smith, but I've been here for a while. It was one of my focus once elected to make sure that I was on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Because the world has shrunk from what it was 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And I knew when I came in that it would be more interconnected than ever, and it would become more important than ever. So I agree with you. I don't care whether some say it's not an A committee. In my mind, it is. And what I have noticed in this, more people were requesting to get on this committee than ever before. They were lining up, saying, I want to be on the House Foreign Affairs Committee because that's how important it is. I've got individuals lining up, Mr. Chairman, asking, can both of us come speak at different events? And they are proud of the fact that as Americans, we are demonstrating what democracy is all about. Democracy is not one side having their way all the time. Democracy is not about agreeing all the time. Democracy is about debating. Democracy is about trying to make sure that different points of view are heard. Democracy is not to be just talked about, it has to be demonstrated. And I think that's what we try to do on this committee, is to demonstrate the democratic process with all of its good and ugly at times. That's what we're here, and that's why I enjoy the relationship and can tell you with the same kind of respect, the same kind of communication that you gave me as a ranking member, I will be giving to you. And I really mean that. Let me just say that, you know, I always talk about the 3 Ds: democracy, development, and diversity. Tremendously important. Inclusion, working together. I think that when we talk about, as the chairman just talked about, some key issues, when we look around the world, they are all important. We need to come together and be together because of the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Democracy's on the line. Some have come to me other places and say, well, what does the United States, what issues do the United States have in Ukraine? The issue we have is democracy and to stand up for it and to prevent further incursions on sovereign property by another country. Because that becomes a threat to all of us. Mr. McCall and I traveled together right after the invasion, went to the borders of Poland, saw the people crossing the border, talked to the governor of Lviv, listened to those who had been victimized by this war, listening to women who talked about how they were ripped from their families, children endangered, hospitals bombed, every inhumane thing that you can think of, infrastructure targeted. We have to stand to make a difference, and I think that we can do that together. We can give the information that individuals may need to show that the taxpayer dollars that has been gone to Ukraine is accounted for. And I hope that we can do that. as it pertains to Afghanistan, I welcome an oversight of Afghanistan in its entirety. I think that if we want to understand what took place and how it took place or what happened with the evacuation, we have to look at the entire picture. And so I want to make sure that we learn from the lessons of Afghanistan, the lessons of decisions that we've made, the lessons of how we got in as well as how we got out, the lessons of what we did wrong over a 20-year period of time and what we did right. Because if we don't look at the whole scenario, we could fall into the same system again. It is important, I think, for the American people that we do just that. It is also important that we've done, as we've done in Ukraine, that we do in China. And that is working with our allies. One of the things that I think that is tremendously important and that has happened in Ukraine that Vladimir Putin never thought would happen, that our European allies, NATO, the EU, would stay together, that we would work collectively together. We never thought at one point that Germany would be as involved as they have been. We never thought that the French would stick with this coalition. Guess who never thought it so also? Vladimir Putin. He counted on us to be divided. And so we didn't disregard our allies. We included them. We tried to make sure that their interests were heard and working together, because that unity is what will prevail and continue the democratic process. So it will be. We've got to make sure in China that we're standing up, and when there is an invasion of our sovereignty, we stand together and have action. When we see individuals are trying to steal our intellectual property, we need to speak with one voice. When we talk about our economies, we've got to make sure that we're bringing and having supply chain first in the United States of America. And we've got to make sure when we deal with the region, we're not only, when we're focused on China, the best way to keep pressure on China is to make sure, as we've seen recently, Japan stepping up, the Philippines stepping up, South Korea stepping up, Malaysia, Indonesia, and we can go down the entire Indo-Pacific and make sure that they're included therein. And that way we put the collective pressure on China to make sure that, again, the democracy stands and prevails. And yes, we can't forget other parts of the world, like Africa. The other way that we compete with China is showing up, is being there, not leaving the playing field to China. And I believe we should not be there just because of China. We should be there because it is the right thing. I live by the words of Dr. King. It's always the right time to do the right thing. And investing and doing what we need to do in Africa by being there. China now has more consulates on the continent than America does. We have jurisdiction over the State Department. We need to talk about the State Department and others about making sure that we're in the rural areas of the continent. We can't put it on the back burner. It is important in our global competition with China and Russia, but in my mind, it's most important because it's the humanitarian thing to do on a continent that is the youngest and fastest growing on this planet. and who we're going to need deeply because of the resources that are contained therein. Our own backyard. We can't forget it. And we want to talk about, as we need to, migration. We need to also examine the root causes of it. We need to know how we can prevent, because most individuals that I've talked to, they're leaving and trying to get to these shores of the greatest country of the world because they can't do anything. They're being persecuted and prosecuted in their own land. They have no hope or opportunities. So we need to look at what we can do in the Western Hemisphere, our hemisphere, working collectively together to get it done. Absolutely important. Haiti may be a small island, but a very symbolic one. And making sure that we're focused and not leaving it alone and saying that we have no interest. So I think that there's so much that we can do, so much that we have done, so much more that we can do, and so much more that we will do. I'm going to go to some important announcements here, but I just want to say the United States of America is the greatest country that this planet has ever seen. And everywhere I go, every square inch, our friends and our enemies are really looking up to us. They're either jealous of us or want to be like us. And I say, so let us lead by example. The example that I know that Mr. McCall, Chairman McCall, and I will show. The example that no matter where we go, we can talk about our unity, we can talk about how we debate, but we can talk about how we come back together for this great country called the United States of America. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take the opportunity to briefly introduce our subcommittee ranking members, as well as the new Democratic members of the committee. We've got a particularly talented group of members ready to get the work done and tackle the biggest challenges in global affairs. And as you've indicated, I just listened to and saw the article about the great, my other D, diversity that you've had on your ranking members. And I look at them and I think that we've got good individuals to work together in a similar fashion as you and I on the subcommittee level. And so excellent choices, and I congratulate all of the chairmen and women of the subcommittees. On our end, I'm proud to say the ranking member on the Subcommittee of Africa is the gentlelady from California, Sarah Jacobs. The ranking member on the Subcommittee of Europe, the gentleman from Massachusetts, William Keating. The ranking member from the Subcommittee on the Indo-Pacific, the gentleman from California, Ami Bera. The ranking member on the Subcommittee of the Middle East, North Africa, and Central Asia, the gentleman from Colorado. Oh, I got that wrong. Minnesota. I don't know why I said Colorado. I'm jumping ahead of myself. I really know why I said Colorado. But from Minnesota, Dean Phillips. The ranking member for the Subcommittee on the Western Hemisphere, from the state of Texas, Joaquin Castro. The ranking member from the Subcommittee on Global Health and Global Human Rights and International Organization, the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Susan Weil. The ranking member on the Subcommittee on Oversight and Accountability, the gentleman from Colorado, Jason Crow. And the vice ranking member of the committee, the gentlelady from North Carolina, Kathy Manning. Now I'd like to introduce the new Democratic members on the committee. Representative Greg Stanton of Arizona. Congressman Stanton represents Arizona's 4th District, having previously served as a mayor of the city of Phoenix. His experience as not only a member of Congress, but as an executive in Phoenix will be invaluable to this committee. Representative Madeline Dean of Pennsylvania. Congresswoman Dean represents the 4th District of Pennsylvania, and though this is her first time joining the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I've had the pleasure of traveling with her on official HFAC travel, where I saw firsthand her passion about how our foreign policy can deliver real results for the American people at home. Representative Jared Moskowitz of Florida. Congressman Moskowitz represents Florida's 23rd District, and I welcome him not only to the committee, but to the United States Congress. His years of experience as a legislator in Florida will be instrumental on this committee, where his values for democracy and support for American allies will be instrumental to his work on this committee. Representative Jonathan Jackson, who represents Illinois' 1st District. Many of you may know that Mr. Jackson is the middle son of the civil rights leader, the Reverend Jesse Jackson. So that lets you know that Representative Jackson grew up in the struggles in the civil rights era in Chicago, and he understands and practices the principles of injustice, of Dr. King, of injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Representative Sidney Kamlager Dove, who represents California's 37th District, where she represents a diaspora of groups from all over the world. She brings new energy and ideas about ways to invest in our partnerships and uplift communities across the globe, very much in the same spirit of the now mayor of Los Angeles, the dynamic Karen Bass, who she succeeds in both Congress and on this committee. And returning, he's no stranger to us, Jim Costa of California. So he really wasn't off. He was off and he was back on before he was off. But we're very happy to have Jim to stay and remain with us on this committee. And lastly, we have Representative Jason Crow of Colorado. Congressman Crow represents the 6th District there, and having served in the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and Armed Services Committee, and also as a former Army Ranger, who we thank for his service and dedication to our country and his sacrifices, he understands the vital work of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and we welcome him here. And so, Mr. Chairman, I will enter into the record the complete list of Democrats on the Foreign Affairs Committee, as well as committee assignments, and I now yield back to the chair.
And without objection, so ordered. I want to thank you for your powerful eloquence, sir. That was a very moving testimony, and it's a real honor to know you and call you a friend as well. And for those who are new to the committee, what you say on this committee is heard around the world. And with that, we have a great responsibility in what we say. I'm always amazed because I just think, yeah, it's just me and Greg talking, right? But you get picked up all over the world, and your statements have an impact all over the world. When we carry our message of freedom and democracy that goes into Russia or China or North Korea or Iran, they listen. Just like they listened to Reagan when he talked about these values and he brought down the Soviet Union. So that is the power of this committee. This committee has probably, in that sense, more power than any other in this Congress. So with that, I'd like to move on to the organizational items on the agenda. We'll consider the committee rules, which were circulated to offices last week. These rules are very much similar, almost identical to our rules from last Congress. They reflect minor technical changes, set forth the jurisdiction for the full committee and our 7 subcommittees. They also revert to the longstanding text of Committee Rule 22 governing subpoenas, as it was for decades under both Democrat and Republican majorities through the 116th Congress, the last time that this committee issued subpoenas. And for the record, I have provided Ranking Member Meeks with the same commitment that Chairman Engel gave to me and abided by, that I will consult with the ranking member not later than 48 hours before the issuance of any subpoenas. So with that, I'm pleased to yield to the ranking member.
Thank you very much for yielding, and I will support the adoption of the rules package. I would like to just mention the change in subpoena authority, as you just indicated. A congressional subpoena, as you know, is a powerful tool and should not be used unilaterally without notice and consultation with the minority. We should take our oversight responsibilities seriously, and there's a need not to be any surprises. And I know, and I appreciate the chairman's ensuring that we will be consulted 48 hours prior to the issuance of a subpoena, and a commitment that the Democratic, that the prior Democratic chairman, Mr. Engel, made to the minority and upheld in practice. And so we will look forward to working together in that. And with that, I yield back to the chair.
I thank the ranking member. Do any members wish to speak on the rules? Hearing none, are there any amendments being offered on the rules? Hearing none, the question now occurs on the adoption of the committee rules. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The committee rules are adopted. The next order of business is to adopt an initial list of committee professional staff as required by Clause 9 of House Rule 10. The list was circulated in advance. Without objection, I move that the committee staff be considered, that the list be considered read and adopted. Hearing no objection, so ordered. The last order of business is adopting the committee's oversight plan for the 118th Congress, as required by the House rules. The text was circulated in advance to offices. Committee's oversight plan sets out the general oversight intentions of the full committee and reflects input from both sides of the aisle. This committee has oversight responsibilities over the State Department and several other government agencies, and it's our job to ensure that they are operating effectively. And with that, I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The oversight plan we will also adopt reflects a broad range of topics on which the committee will focus during this Congress. This does reflect the chairman's priorities, and in a spirit of constructive dialogue, we've had an opportunity to provide suggestions and comments, and we thank you for that. And in that same spirit, I will not hesitate to raise with him going forward any input or concerns we have about how the committee is focusing its time and energies. And I yield back to the chairman.
Thank the ranking member. Do any other members wish to speak on the oversight plan? Hearing none, are there any amendments? Hearing none, without objection, I move that the oversight plan be considered as read and adopted. Hearing no objection, it's so ordered. Without objection, staff are authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the committee rules and the oversight plan. This completes the organizational business required by the House rules, and I'd like to recognize the ranking member for any concluding remarks that he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I conclude by simply saying that I am proud to serve alongside this distinguished group of members of the United States Congress on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and that I look forward to working with all of my colleagues as we work to prioritize human rights, preserve democracy, promote prosperity, and protect our national security. This committee is crucial in the conduct of American foreign policy, and it is no lie to say our work reverberates around the entire world. And with that responsibility in mind, I look forward to working with all of you here today for the next 2 years. And Mr. Chairman, I really look forward to continuing to work with you and our strong friendship together. And with that, I yield back to you.
Now I thank the ranking member, and likewise, I look forward to working with you, as well as all the committee members on both sides of the aisle. This is probably the most talented bunch I've seen in my 20 years, my tenure in Congress, and I look forward to the energy, the devotion to our country I look forward to doing what's best for the nation, working together, Republicans and Democrats. At the end of the day, we're all Americans. And when you do travel abroad, and you will, we don't represent our parties overseas. We are the the delegation from the United States of America first. And we have that responsibility over abroad and overseas. And so, and let me just echo the ranking member's comments. The amount of members that wanted to get on this committee was enormous. So I would consider yourselves very lucky to be serving where you are today, because there are many members that we, quite frankly, had to, that were very well qualified, but we went with the best and the brightest, that's you. And some we had to say we just couldn't take anymore. But I'm proud to have all of you here. And with that, the committee does stand adjourned. I would like to announce before I gavel out, though, that there will be a classified brief on the supplemental funding to Ukraine, which is very important, in the House SCIF at 3 o'clock. This is very important. I wanted to have this in a classified space prior to an open hearing for many reasons, but primarily so that the members could be educated about where the money's gone. When I talk about Ukraine, most members support the effort, but they have a lot of questions about accountability. They want to know where the money has gone, and they want to know what accountability measures have been put in place. And you will hear that there are actually 4 audits currently being performed with respect to the funding, and many other things you'll find out in the SCIF that I think is important as we message to the rest of our members, our colleagues in this Congress. And then we will have an open hearing on this issue as well, so that the American people can hear about where the money has gone and the accountability of that funding, and also about the Inspector General's audits that have taken place. And with that, the committee now stands adjourned.